Nobody's going to say no to, I saved money, I saved time, and I found a honey hole of how to do this again for the organization.
Welcome to the Sourcing Hero. I'm Catherine. We have two very special guests on the show today, Anthony Clervi, CEO of Una, and Cindy Rittel, Senior Sourcing Advisor at Una. Welcome, guys.
Hi, Catherine. Nice to meet you.
Fancy seeing you here.
So glad to be here through another Zoom meeting. How about it?
You know what? That's how we live now.
Let's do it.
I have you guys on because you both have such an interesting perspective, not only on group purchasing, but as it pertains to businesses evolving their strategy with sourcing. And then Cindy, particularly for you, you speak to supply chain professionals, procurement professionals, who we call sourcing heroes daily. You're on the front lines for Una. So I wanted to tap into your mind and your infinite wisdom on how we can help sourcing heroes get through the challenges of even considering group purchasing and overcoming some of those misconceptions. What are the common responses you hear from some of these sourcing professionals about why they wouldn't normally select group purchasing as part of their strategy?
It's a great question. So for me, and title is Senior Sourcing Advisor. You could look at it as sales, but ultimately I'm a teacher. And a lot of what my role is education. And that gap of education out in the business or corporate class of trade around GPOs and what they do, or those misconceptions that are out there. And that lies both with our members and organizations that we work with, and then certainly the suppliers as well. So for me, a lot of my first calls are really around what is a GPO, how can we help, and how can we help that sourcing hero? Each organization is so very different. It's not a copy paste with every organization that I work with. An organization that comes in with 5 to 10 employees is certainly not going to have the same playbook or strategy as a Fortune 500 that might come in that we work with. So as an advisor, my job is to, one, educate, and then two, certainly listen. So Anthony's favorite question is, what does success look like? What does that look like for that sourcing hero that comes in? What are you trying to do? For some, it's lowering cost. For others, it's more of a strategic 2021 plan. And I need to understand what that is so that Una can align as a partner with that member and help them, the sourcing hero, succeed, and then certainly the organization succeed as well. Anthony, I know you've been in this space a lot longer than me and certainly not unfamiliar with that education gap. Would you say that has shrank since you first started, or it's getting better, or what's your opinion on that?
So I think the data and just time has helped. Of course, the genesis of GPOs is in healthcare. So I think you nailed it. We are, you mentioned yourself as a teacher, just educating the marketplace about the opportunity that exists in using or applying a GPO to your overall procurement strategy. I still think it's a wider gap, in my opinion, than it should be. For whatever reason, ultimately, why I giggle is I still think that leaves a tremendous opportunity for Una, self-servingly, and others that I believe are still effective in the marketplace to share a story and allow the market, in this case, private business, healthcare, other lines of business and verticals, to understand that this is available and why you would want to have a GPO be a part of your overall procurement strategy. What I usually say when I'm sharing with either members or practitioners or sourcing heroes, if you will, is a GPO, the right type of GPO for this specific category. They just needed to know, and in this case, Una, we just need to know our place. And our place is not to replace anything or be the overall procurement strategy, but be a part of it. That's where the tremendous opportunity is. And it opens up, I think, some exciting conversations that we're in each and every day.
And Catherine, my favorite procurement professional that comes in is somebody that is fresh to an organization. I'll say like a month or less than a month.
Right. So they just got the job or whatever.
Correct.
Yeah.
They just switched roles, new organization, and they stop me. And this happens quite frequently, by the way. They stop me mid conversation and say, Cindy, I already know what a GPO is. I know that it works. I was at a previous organization where, for whatever reason, they weren't allowed to use a GPO, or just it wasn't part of their strategy.
They just didn't embrace the model.
Exactly.
Right.
So the first thing I did when I got to this new role was Google GPOs and how do I become a part of
And
one.
this proverbial they, is it usually C-suite? Because I know we see that too.
Exactly.
You know, hey,
Exactly.
hey, my C-suite are my owners. We don't work with third parties. We only go direct with suppliers. And there's just like it's just there's a density there. Do you ever get anything beyond that, like a why? Do you ever get an understanding of, because I know there's a lot of folks that will listen to this that don't know how to overcome that objection. Do you have advice on that, or do you ever get any good feedback of why?
So a really good objection I get is, so my CEO, my director, whomever they're reporting to, they're going to say, "Well, what did I hire you for?" And my response always back is, "Well, I found the GPO. That's why you hired me. I found this additional value. I found this additional savings and I brought it to the organization. That's exactly why you hired me." It's still, it's still hard, I think, for the sourcing hero to go back to C-suite and say that, and unfortunately, for most of those conversations, the buck stops there.
What I've found too, I'm obviously not. I'm still talking to members, and we're thankful for all the members that have chosen to still stick with us. And we're always looking for supplier consolidation where it's applicable. I like to use the adage, like the mind is like a parachute, it only works if it's open. So, and I also believe, a man convinced against his will is still unconvinced. So some of this stuff is, just like talking to a concrete wall if you don't have C-suite embracing these new concepts. I wouldn't say new concepts or ideas, fresh ideas that actually are going to help everybody, specifically the balance sheet. And the point being is, hey, you hired me to do hopefully a series of tasks. I'm incentivized, ideally, to improve the bottom line, probably consolidate, enforce compliance, or create SOPs around compliance. But yes, I found the GPO, but I'm also aware that on some of my direct spend or more strategic opportunities, I'm going to spend the bulk of my time on that. So on the non-strategic, whether we're talking about a couple million or 10 million or 50 million in indirect spend or tail spend or all the fanciful words we can use, why would you not allow me to partner with the right GPOs? Because you don't have to work with just one, the right GPOs. There should be a la carte options. Why would you not allow me to do that? Because our number one asset for everyone, for every human, is of course our time. So I think just having those conversations, and I think in times we've even asked, would you allow us to have a discussion with you, to speak with that CPO or C-suite or higher title, to at least have a form of education, maybe put some tension in the conversation to see, look, it's not even just about Uno. We want to just open your mind to the realities of what you're dealing with.
So, how much time do you think somebody could save potentially? So, they've got maybe several categories that they're looking at a GPO for that they normally bid out.
Well, before you answer, Cindy, I think you just brought a great point, Catherine, is not only that's a good selling opportunity to say, let me quantify the time and value of even sourcing through a GPO, but as a relevant topic. But Cindy, I want to hear your thoughts on what Catherine shared.
I'd be compelled to say days. Reason being is time can be, quantified in so many different ways. But let's just talk about our pre-negotiated contracts. These are contracts that are very client favorable, that theoretically should not have any red lines at all. They're pre-negotiated. How many days does that save of back and forth with legal teams because these contracts are pre-negotiated? So not only that, we save time back and forth, legal fees, so on and so forth. I work with procurement or sourcing heroes or procurement professionals in a capacity that I try to be helpful and not hurtful. I'm not a
Sure.
pest. I'm there to be an extension of their procurement team, is the way that I like to explain it. If they have
Absolutely.
tasks or assignments, or, what do you hate doing throughout the day? Do you hate managing tail spend? Is that a pain for you? I can do it. That's fine. That's what our team can do. And we're really good at it. And we know who to go to, and we can help save you emails and calls and things of that nature, to also help you save money,
Well,
hopefully.
So let me jump in too. So quantifying, I think it's days and weeks if you had to quantify. What if
Sure.
it's a month, depending on the size of the contract, the category?
I mean, if you're skipping an RFP,
The RFP process, typically you're going
Absolutely.
to go for 3 or 4 folks and get them in there. And then, in the days when we used to meet face to face, you do face to face and run through all that. And we're reviewing everything. So at the end of it, are you saving, uh, a 40-hour work week on volume and categories that certainly you should never dedicate that much time? Absolutely.
when I talked to Frank Corris, shout out to Frank in an earlier episode, he told me about a time when he took over procurement for a very large company, had taken a few people from his previous job onto his new team, and they had dozens of categories to cover. And they had started the process of actually working with Coupa to get some
Okay.
software in place.
They're a great partner.
Yeah, and he had to figure out a way to get data in the system quick enough so that they could A, start saving money now, and B, by the time that everything was up and running, they had numbers to work with so that they could start thinking long term,
Right.
strategic.
Right.
And instead of being stuck in the mud with having RFIs, RFPs, whatever it is,
Right.
being sent out, by the time that those would have been done, he already had a full set of data to work with, had analytics in place, and knew exactly what his next move was. And they were able to move on, and they weren't still waiting to figure out who they were even going to consider.
In the right categories and where it makes sense, Frank, he embraces the concept of a GPO. Right.
It was saving time, it was becoming more efficient. The cost savings was a really nice result.
Bonus. Right. Or cherry on
Yeah.
top. Right.
Yes, but for him and his team and the amount of spend they had to manage, efficiency was the number one asset.
Look, I will say this: in the early days when we got into, propped it up and trying to figure out, okay, what's going to be the mission of Una and our values, and how do we find the right members and work with the right supplier partners. A lot of the tension and I'll say objection that I was dealing with, is we've discussed it a little bit, is the guy or gal across the table to say it wasn't pressure from C-suite. It was a little bit arrogance and stubbornness. I'll say it. We love you, sourcing heroes, but as always, sometimes we can all get in our own way. And it was, well, why do I need you? That's what I do. And it wasn't in a sense from the C-suite pressure. It was just, well, I don't want you to take my job. And so a lot of the education is, I'm seeing, I guess, to go back to some of the original phrases, maybe not as much of a gap around the concept, but embracing the understanding that this isn't a replacement, it's a supplement, it's an add-on, it's for no additional cost.
It's
So
about empowering them to move from that purchasing agent type of role where all they're doing is purchasing, figuring out those small tactical moves, empowering them to take on a larger strategic role.
just another bullet in the holster or a gun or whatever I'm running out of metaphors, but you get it. Empowerment, empowerment.
Yeah, I think we've hit our limit on.
Are we hit our limit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anthony, for those in our audience that have not taken a dive or researched group purchasing, will you give them just a quick overview of what group purchasing is and how a GPO plays its part in that?
So the down and dirty, just a little bit of history. The concept of group purchasing, genesis from healthcare, hospitals getting together, leveraging their spend, understanding, wow, we've got all these products and services. How do we bring this together and save money, consolidate, et cetera, et cetera? And that's where the concept of GPOs, of course, genesis, and it's really over the last, again, decades, ended up or evolved into or transitioned into the private and public sector as well. And so I like to think of it in, I don't say this often, but we used to kind of say the concept of Costco without the membership fee and without the idea that you have to buy in bulk. But ultimately, I think a mass majority of the community would understand that, look, if you leverage a lot of buying volume, you can negotiate pricing and do things on your own or as an organization as a whole that you could never do on your own. So I guess simply said, the concept of GPO for most businesses or organizations that we serve is that we can bring them value economically, service terms in a contract that they could never get on their own because of our massive buying volume. When we work with big box retailers and big brands that we've all heard of, and it's free to be a member, and the value is really built in. I think, as Cindy said, like, look, it's ready to go. You can enhance the contract. There is some autonomy, but the idea is that you should be getting value from a GPO economically, service terms, et cetera, that you can never get on your own. I really think that what we're seeing more and more is trying to find the right fits, find the right organizations where they embrace this concept, or we can have a decent conversation and talk about, as we've just continued to emphasize, how can we empower you more and give you more opportunity to do what you're really good at, focus more on your direct spend, and getting an understanding that we're there to complement, help, and serve, and do nothing more, but always thinking about how can we add value. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. I want to clarify, I think it's important that we talk about who a GPO can serve. Cindy, does it make a difference if a company is small, medium, large corporation? Who can benefit from a GPO?
Anybody listening to this, I can help you. I don't care how big your
There it is.
organization is, how small your organization is. I had alluded to it earlier on in the pod that the playbooks might look a little bit different and the strategies or
Right.
tactical approaches for each organization. But if you are a one man shop, reach out to me. If you're a Fortune 500, we can certainly help. So anybody in between.
Let's dig into that though. So, how does it differ if you're a one man show, which we tend to,
Man or woman.
yeah, a one person, a one sourcing hero procurement program versus somebody that could be managing a team of 4 or 5, maybe 10? What's the difference in how that will look to them?
So the approach will be the same. Again, I like to ask, why did you reach out? What does success look like? How can I help you? What are you thinking? Those types of questions to understand a little bit more of what's, peel back the layers of the onion to understand what are your goals. In a situation where you're working with a smaller organization or a one woman shop, if you will, they are going to probably need a lot more help. And that's really the approach or the value of Una or an individual like myself. An organization with 5 to 10 people is not going to have a procurement team. They're not going to have the luxury of having somebody that can spend time on, pricing out or sourcing or even contracts for that matter for an organization of that size.
Without using names, not that it's just, we want to be mindful of disclosures. We can talk about our members, but we don't have to use names, but it's
Sure.
real live. Give an example of, you can think of maybe in the last 6 months or so, of a member that we've helped that's got one or two folks, and then maybe somebody that's got 5 to 10. Of course, there's varying revenue levels, considerable differences there, but I'd love to hear some examples. I think that might help our audience. Everybody loves that real story of empowerment.
Sure. So for somebody that's 1 to 2 people, a good example might be IT. So those 1 to 2 people, they might have a laptop, they might have a desktop, whatever the case might be. They're going to be able to leverage an IT agreement that we have and get the same pricing that an organization that's selling or that's buying rather 500 to 1,000 laptops, right? So that's a real live example of, hey, I need a price on a Dell.
What's some of the average savings that we've seen? Because, look, we're talking to members of all shapes and sizes. And do
Mhm.
you have a recent one where you saw some considerable savings? That, if you feel comfortable sharing, I know that always can be a hit or miss, or varying deltas, I should say.
So on that example, it was the big lure there was the time savings. I
Okay.
went out and got cost, which to me is priceless. But around there, it was about 15 to 20%.
Okay.
So finding comparables or comparables for them and being able to provide solutions. Hey, pick A, B, or C. Here's what I would recommend. Boom.
How long from the beginning of the conversation, the education, the introduction to either the incumbent supplier partner or new, again, how long would you say from beginning end did that take to work with that sourcing hero to, hey, here's my problem, here's the solution, here's how we implement it, and we're off to the races? What's the conservative timeline?
That particular example, they were very lean and nimble. So it was very quick. It was within a week is what
Within
it
a
was.
week. Okay.
A week.
Wow. So
Yes,
5 business days.
The speed to savings potential is pretty high.
it's quick.
So
Yes,
then on a larger member, let's again use live examples, not names, maybe choose a few categories where it's 5 to 10 sourcing heroes.
sure.
What kind of time frame, what category, what can you speak to give an example?
So a good one, ironically enough, is to speak to is travel.
Okay.
And I know that there's not much going on right now with COVID, which is actually probably
But
the best
someday it'll
time to,
return.
well,
Right.
my opinion is it's the best time to look at travel. While you don't have anybody traveling, let's reevaluate what you have in place so that when we do travel again in the near future, you're locked and
Right.
loaded. Something like that, where there's a few more people involved, more stakeholders involved, and significant more spend. I'll say that. It's
What
a
kind
lot,
of spend? What's significant?
millions. We're
Millions.
talking
Okay.
millions.
5 to 10 million roughly.
Sure.
Okay.
That's a little bit of a slower ship to turn.
So we're talking 90 days, 6 months.
Could be 90 to 60 days. It also depends on the current contract in place. So in
Okay.
some cases, in this particular example, there's a contract coming due
Okay.
towards, I believe it's the end of the year, early next year. So the conversations last a lot longer. And again, 60 to 90 days is quick, I would say, for that amount
Yeah,
of
that's
spend.
pretty quick.
That's pretty fast. I would say in some cases it could be a year is what it could.
Okay.
So it's just it's really and by the way, Una, we do a good job of setting those expectations on the front end, understanding what are the dates, what are the goals, who's doing what by when, and when would you realistically like for this to be implemented. If it is a year from now, that's fine. We just like to be on the same wavelength because I think a
Proper
lot of,
expectations.
sure, exactly.
That's good. Catherine, I don't know if that was helpful. I just think it's always good to share with our audience the real world examples, timelines, categories. I just thought it might be helpful to share.
And I'll say this, Catherine, I do want to hit that on those larger organizations that we're saying could take 60, 90 days, it could be a lot quicker. It could be that 5 day turn. It's just how quickly they can move, how nimble they are, what type of empowerment or authority they have within the organization. Anybody can move that quickly. It's as quick as they want to move. I'll say that.
What is typically their first goal? Is it cost savings? Is it time savings?
Most everybody comes in wanting to know cost, and the liar behind that, or the layer behind that, is have I negotiated a good deal, or do I currently have a good deal? That's typically what the market pricing or the cost analyses or the benchmarking is used for, is to understand, can you guys really get me a better deal than what I have negotiated today? So typically we start with cost, but my conversations always turn more towards value. So yes, we're going to save you money, but do you understand the value of these contracts that we have outside of rebates? There's some price locking values in a lot of our contracts where those suppliers cannot increase prices for a certain amount of time or years. To me, that's very valuable because that means we don't have to revisit this a year from now. As much as you love bids and bidding, I'm sure that you don't want to revisit this a year from now, and neither do I. So let's lock in the pricing so you don't have to worry about it, and you can worry and take care of bigger business or other categories that are coming due or down the pipeline.
Okay, so what would you say to our audience right now? Maybe there's a few out there that are considering looking into group purchasing to help them with some of their non strategic indirect spend, but they're not sure about how to communicate that perhaps to their leadership.
I would say, first of all, let's chat and give us a chance. Let's prove it out. We can prove it out with quantifiers being, actual savings dollars. And then not only that, but non quantitative. One might argue that time can be quantitated, but regardless, nobody's going to say no to, I saved money, I saved time, and I found, a honey hole, if you will, of how to do this again, copy and paste for the organization. I really have a hard time believing that somebody's going to say no to that. And that's what I would say is just, let's work on a category together. Let's prove it out. We can do that. And then we can come up with a conversation to sell it internally. That's not a problem.
I think I would add to, just going back to what Cindy had said, just making sure you have some clear objectives. Like you don't have to have the whole thing figured out before you start doing some research online or start asking some colleagues, some other practitioner or sourcing heroes, but just kind of get an idea of what does success look like for you and what is it you're really trying to accomplish. And that's fair. You can do your research and work with the GPO or partners or competitors like us. I'll just speak to the GPO generically. And just make sure, though, you really have an understanding of what does success look like. What are you really trying to accomplish by when? And, we haven't talked about it much, but I would say kind of the varying factors that we see with larger members that we work with compared to smaller members. Larger members usually come in with one category. They don't have a lot of leverage there, and they need us to go deep within that category and have some very, just in-depth conversations, understanding from terms to service to pricing to how long the contract is in place. Whereas our smaller members, I've seen, again, this is my observation, they're typically going to jump on to 3 to 5 different categories much more quickly. So I think just understanding that what I'm getting at, really, it's like the old adage, you bite an elephant one bite at a time, and just making sure we always recommend, no matter the size of the member, that let's just start with really a quick win. And for most organizations that could, again, we could go into it, off supplies, shipping, maybe it's IT, maybe it is travel, if that's consistent in your business, janitorial supplies, PPE offerings. I mean, there could be some quick top of mind things. Let's start there and check the box and then go to phase 2. All of this can happen in iterations, so you don't have to do everything at once. That would be the other thing I would recommend because it can be overwhelming.
You guys, that was really great advice. I hope that our audience was taking notes. If not, they can give us a call, right?
Or re-listen. Yes, they can totally give us a call. Where can they find us, Head of Marketing?
They can find us at una.com. Literally any page that you go to, there's a button that you can click that will lead you to Cindy's calendar or a contact form that goes straight to Cindy, and she will reach out to you within 1 business day or sooner. I've seen her jump on chats. Even if you want to hit the chat function, she is watching and waiting. She'll talk to you immediately.
Hopefully 1 business hour.
Yeah, we've got Cindy and a couple others that will serve, head of member experience and some member experience folks. And I've even jumped on calls. Like, nothing is beneath us. We would love to chat with you and learn about your business or learn about your organization, private healthcare, what have you. And I will say, I'm going to give a little shout out to Cindy. I've never seen someone who didn't come from this space really embrace it so much. She believes in our values and really believes not only just she wants to do the best and exceed expectations for our members, but really believes in bringing in our supplier partners and making sure everybody is set up for success. So you're in for a real surprise if you reach out to us. And sometimes, a lot of what we'll do is, I'm going to take a minute to do a sales pitch. It's not even, maybe it doesn't make sense for that time. And so we want to take a very educational and consultative approach to at least share with you what's available. And sometimes we'll refer you into other areas because you have a very niche need or what have you. So there's just so much that I think is available, and a lot of it is through education. We want to overcome the myths, and we would just be thankful to talk to anybody who wanted to reach out because we really believe and have a passion for what we're doing.
I love it, Anthony, and I love your passion. That's why we're all here. It's because we have our fearless leader guiding the way. Cindy, aka Moon Goddess.
Come on.
I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your insight. I know that you have such a connection to our sourcing heroes and a lot of other procurement professionals that need help. And both of you, thanks again for sharing your thoughts.
Glad to be here.
Forward to hearing from our audience on this episode.
Can't wait. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you for having me, Catherine.